Good afternoon, good evening. This is Diane from Stamping with Diane in Innisfil, Ontario. Thank you for joining me for tea and cards using our Cup of Tea suite. That comes with a stamp set and coordinating dies. These are the projects that we've been working on the last few weeks using masking, using watercolors, and using the ready-made teacup cards. If you missed those videos, they are on my YouTube channel, so please go ahead and check that out. It's Stamping with Diane T is my YouTube channel. So I have a really fun card for you tonight. This is a different sized card base. We are still at the 4 1/4, but we are cutting this one at 6 1/2. So this looks rather small, doesn't it? So we are going to score it at, I want it to be the regular 5 1/2. So I'm going to put it in my paper trimmer and just score it here. So I just have about an inch. Is it an inch? Yes, an inch there to play with. So with my bone folder, I'll fold that over and give it a nice crease. Now for today's project, we're also using the designer series paper that comes with the tea, and it's called the Tea Boutique. And this is the pattern I've chosen tonight for us to use. I really like this one because it matches really nicely with the Petal Pink card base that I'm using. This is the Sweet Sorbet. We've got some garden green and some crushed curry that we'll also be using. So as we're going to start this one, this is actually going to be our card front. So as I place the designer paper, I'm lining it up on both sides here. I see it's not exactly the same size, so we can fix that up by trimming it, but I'm going to adhere it first. And to adhere this, I'm going to use our tear and tape. This is a great, super sticky tape, and it's just really easy to use. So what I'm going to do is lift this flap, run my tear and tape right along the edge here, and then I always press it down nice and firmly, and you can either use your fingernail or you take your pick tool to pull off that edge. I've got this right up to the bottom edge here, and I'm going to press this down. So now I've got a really nice clean edge here. Now let's bring in that paper trimmer one more time and just snip off that wee little bit of extra there. Guess I didn't quite cut this exactly. And there we go. Now I've got a nice fresh edge in just the right size. Okay, if you have been tracking with me, you know that we are in Sale-abration right now. And with Sale-abration, one of the free products you've been able to receive is the silver and gold specialty paper. It comes in 2 different patterns as it's named, silver and gold. We have the striped pattern and the polka dot pattern. So you can see they are one-sided because of the gold and silver foiling on them. But there's another fun way you can use these papers. You can actually color the papers and with blending brushes. So here's an example I did. Instead of just having it as white, I used my blending brush and used a couple of tones in here and actually blended the colors in the center. Or you can just blend parts of your page. And another trick you can do with this is what we're going to do today. So I've pulled out my Sweet Sorbet Stampin Blends, and I'm just going to color this. So I'm going to use the wide end. We have a wide end and a narrow end on each of the markers. And I'm just going to kind of come along here. The lines are not perfectly straight, which is just fine, because you're going to notice as you color that the color doesn't really adhere to the foiling part of the paper. So that was the light, and now I'm going to kind of come in here with the dark, fill in some holes, and just using the side of the marker And as you can tell, I'm not trying to make it uniform or straight or anything like that, but I am just going to get a little bit of color now. And as it sits, now you're going to see how the silver foiling does pop through there. Okay, so it doesn't, the color doesn't adhere to the silver. Let me just go over these ends a little bit, make sure you've got your ends. There we go. It's always good to cover your workspace with a piece of paper so you're not worried about coloring on your tabletop. Now this is going to serve as a focal point here on this front panel. Okay, so I've cut it just a little bit smaller. It's at 3/4 of an inch. Now I could use the tear and tape on this, but I think I'll just run some Stampin' Seal along and pop that right on the card front. So I like how that's pulled out those colors in here. And that is that free paper that you can receive with Sale-abration. Now Sale-abration ends on August 31st, so that's coming up soon. You'll want to get that quickly. All right, now I'm using a whole bunch of my Teacup Dies. This die set has 17 different dies. I like to keep my extra pieces inside. And we're going to use quite a few of them today. So these are the different shapes. And we're going to be using the flowers. We're going to be using another floral. We're using the patterned teacup and the plain teacup. But don't worry, I've done a lot of this work ahead. So you're going to see this come together. So for this one, there's very little stamping actually. Mostly it's the die cutting is creating the appearance on this card. So I have die cut a flat teacup and then the patterned teacup, okay, in the same Petal Pink using those two dies. So these are the pieces I've got. And with my just my liquid glue, I'm just putting some tiny little dots over kind of the thickest parts of this die cut. And remember, the glue does dry clear, so if some of it squishes out, it's not going to be a big problem, but just kind of covering that up. And actually I'm going to let it sit for a second and let that glue get a little bit tacky so it doesn't want to squish out. Now I'm stamping on a scrap of white. And I'm going to stamp a few of our images. So I've got some scraps here, and I'm going to use this kind of foliage look to it. And I've chosen the garden green for this one because, again, the patterned paper has some garden green in it. So I'm just tapping that, stamping it firmly on my white, basic white cardstock. Beautiful clear image. Now I've been using the Simply Chamois for the last little while in my studio and finding it so handy. Now you might think this is small. It is. I've cut my chamois into thirds and I put them in a stamp case, and these work really great when I'm having workshops or class parties, classes. Whoops, I just put that right on the back. There's real life for you. I do this, I give everybody a third of a chamois so they can keep their own craft materials and stamps clean. So I like to have that just handy. So this is a little bit tacky now, especially seeing as I put it in the case. Gee. Okay, so I'm just lining up the edges with the edges, and then I pressed down the center, and that worked out great. There we go. So now you have this detailed pattern on top of the plain teacup. And I want to stamp one more thing. We're going to stamp these tiny flowers, and I'll show you what that is going to do. So I've chosen the crushed curry for this one. And they're already joined on the stamp. So I just need to tap. And here's another scrap of paper I've got handy. And I'm getting those images And I'll wipe this again with my chamois. And we're good to go. Now the chamois looks stained. That's okay. After each crafting session, I just take it over to my sink, give it a little rinse, and pop it back in its case. All right, now this, check it out, is going to line up perfectly with my die and cut those little flowers out. And this die matches up perfectly here and cuts those flowers out. So I have already gone ahead and done that. And here's the images we have. There's our flowers. And before I show you too much, we are going to adhere those to the back of my teacup. So just running a little strip of glue at the top of my teacup and placing this like so. Isn't that cute? And then we are going to add these little yellow flowers. So I'll pull them on screen here for you. And they're pretty tiny. Now, of course, they don't stay joined together this way. So these are small. Here's where, again, your liquid glue works really well. And I'm going to put the larger one, you can kind of put them wherever you want. You're not tied to the way they came out of the die. But I'm going to show you another way. I'll use the big glue on this one. Now I could let that get a little bit tacky as well. I'm using my silicone mat. Now, lots of you have had paper pumpkin kits or some of our other kits that we use in Stampin' Up, and you may have some of these little glue dots left over. And this is a great spot to use some of these little glue dots. So I tend to keep a sheet handy and just pull it in when I want to use something tiny like this. So using my Take Your Pick, I just pull a glue dot off, put it on. Now, I find sometimes, to be honest, people get a little frustrated pulling these off the sheets, but the Take Your Pick tool solves all of those problems. So now that I have the glue dot on there, I'm going to use the Take Your Pick to take the covering off. And I'm just going to pop these little buds of flowers on the green foliage. And as I say, it doesn't really matter where you're placing them, but isn't that cute how it kind of looks like now your whole teacup is blooming. Okay, so now we've built all of this, which is going to look great on our card front. Okay, now that's going to look cute, but I thought we would also, I've used our tailor-made tags, and I've cut out a Sweet Sorbet and a basic white tag, and we're going to also use those on our card front. So with my Sweet Sorbet ink pad, I've decided this is going to be a thank you card. So the thank you sentiment also comes from our teacup stamp set. And I'm just going to press this towards the front. There we go. Wipe it off on my chamois. And I also have, before we build that, I've got an insert. So I love that when I open this card, I see the back of this designer paper. And that's why I really like this design, because our designer papers are gorgeous front and back, and I often have trouble deciding which to use, which to showcase. So with this card design, you get to see both sides. So I'm putting this in as my insert inside the card, and then I've cut a 3/4 inch strip of the same designer paper that I have on the front, and we'll use that as a little decoration inside the card like so. Okay, so then when we open this card, it's beautiful inside and out. All right, so let's finish up the front of our card. we are going to, with these tailored tags, they also come with the reinforcements. So I can either use, I should put this on my silicone mat again, but just going to put a little dots on there. It's not going to take too much to hold this. And I'm going to put it on the white one so it really shows up. There we go. And we're actually going to layer these two like so. So to do that, I thought we'll tie it together. Our baker's twine comes in a 5-pack with all of the in colors for this year. These in colors were launched for 2022. They will last until 2024. So they'll be around for 2 full years. So I've just cut a little piece of the twine, and I'm just going to do one of these little knots. I never leave myself enough room. I'm very skimpy, frugal with my twine and my ribbon. But I think we've done it here. Just keep that loose. And I just wanted to put the loose knot in here to tie together those two, the 2 tags. Okay, let's build this card. So I'm going to lay it out first. I'm going to have my thank you, and I want my teacup to sit off here in the corner. So we're going to add some dimensionals to that. We'll glue these down flat. So I'll just run a little bit of seal here so that I can get the right angle. So let's let that kind of come straight like so. So now my 2 are together, and I'll just use some of my seal to keep going. Pop that on my card front. And let's add dimensionals to the back of our teacups. Now we could use some of the small dimensionals. Would get right up in those corners for me. I have some small ones right here. These little guys will go right up on those flowers to help hold that together and to give them a little bit of stability on the card. That will also fit on the teacup handle. And I guess we can use a big one here. The nice thing, you can mix and match the dimensionals because they are all the same height, the same thickness, okay? Then I like to use my take your pick, pull off all these backings at once. And I pretty much planned out where I want it to sit on my card. Pop those in my little trash bin. And I think it's just going to kind of sit just like so. And let's just dress this up with a few of our basic pearl jewels. And I'll use, they come in different sizes. Got a couple of the large ones left here on this sheet. And I'll put a couple of the smaller pearls up where I can see them here. And I'll pop one more. This take your pick tool, if you don't have one, you need one. It really does help, and it actually turns around and becomes a spatula end on this end. The other feature is this end is the putty end. So sometimes I use this to pick up the small pieces as well. Works well to pick up those little flowers that I was kind of struggling with. So there we have a lovely card that only used a 6.5 inch piece of cardstock as the base. A little bit of designer paper on the outside and the inside, and dressed right up. So host code is still open for the rest of August till the 31st. And I hope to see you soon at one of my classes. Some of them are online, some of them are in person in my studio, so you can check out my listing here. And my YouTube channel is Stamping with Diane T. Thanks everybody. Bye for now.